What would you do if you opened your eyes in the hospital one morning and realized that all the people were dead and the world was full of zombies? As the sun painted the sky a pale orange, a police car slowly made its way down the dusty road. Deputy Sheriff Rick Grimes glanced at his closest friend, Shane Walsh, sitting in the passenger seat. "You know, sometimes life just feels too calm," he said with a smile. Shane nodded. "We need some action, man." Suddenly, a message crackled through the radio warning them about an armed fugitive. They quickly turned their car around and began pursuing the suspects. The fleeing car's tires were blown out, and the vehicle veered off the road. The people inside opened fire. Rick took cover behind the car and returned fire. But then, one of the men pretended to fall and suddenly shot at Rick. Pain stabbed into his chest like a knife, and Rick collapsed to the ground. When Rick opened his eyes, pale fluorescent lights were flickering above him. As he looked around, he realized he was in a hospital room. But something was off. The room was covered in dust, the flowers had withered, and the water bottles were moldy. He struggled to sit up and stand. As he stepped into the hospital corridor, he was met with a horrifying sight. The walls were smeared with blood, and lifeless bodies lay scattered on the floor. He kept moving forward in fear. As he approached a door labeled "Locked," he heard strange growls coming from behind it. Peering through the glass, he saw decaying bodies crammed inside. They looked human, but they weren't. With eyes wild with hunger, they pounded on the door. Terrified, Rick backed away and began to run. When he finally exited the hospital, the world was no longer the same. Cars were overturned, streets abandoned. Birds chirped, but not a single human voice could be heard. He began to walk in horror, hoping to make it home. When he reached his home, he couldn't find his wife Lori or his son Carl. Everything was in chaos, but there were no signs of blood. Clinging to hope, he stepped back out onto the street, only to be struck on the head and collapse to the ground. When he opened his eyes, a young boy was standing over him, pointing a gun at his head. Behind the boy stood a middle-aged man, Morgan Jones. Morgan, thinking Rick was sick, took him into his home. He was trying to survive with his son. Rick learned the truth from them. The dead were coming back and eating the living. Even a single bite could be fatal. Civilization had collapsed and the government was gone. There was only one thing on Rick's mind: finding his family. With the gun and supplies he got from Morgan, he set off toward Atlanta. It was said that survivors were there, but what awaited him was only a terrifying truth.